Welcome to Inner Rhythm, a podcast about the creative process and following your inner voice. As always, we are broadcasting today from the historic home of artists Jackson Pollock and Pollock-Krasner, where in each episode we connect you with their legacy of artistic authenticity. I'm your host and the director of the PK House, Matthew Ward. On today's episode, we uncover the inner rhythm of artist Simon Waranch. At the age of 13, Simon was introduced to the art of glassblowing. Now, age 25, his love affair with the medium has resulted in 5 solo museum exhibitions and numerous group exhibitions worldwide, as well as representation in several fine art galleries across the US and Canada. In this episode, we ask Simon how he translated his passion into a career. We discuss the differences between showing in a gallery setting and showing in an institutional space. We get into the realities of being a young artist selling in today's market, and we also discuss bias towards particular mediums such as glass and how he works against these preconceptions. Simon Waranch, thank you for being here at the Pollock-Krasner House and Study Center. We are talking here in the historic painting studio of Jackson Pollock and Pollock-Krasner. And that's where I want to start things today. Talking about studios, the space in which the artist creates. Initially, both Jackson and then Lee worked in the upstairs studio of the house, the small bedroom with the north-facing window. That was their initial studio, and then Jackson, after converting this barn into his studio, Lee continued to work in that studio until after Pollock's death, and then of course she started working in here from that point. Many of their masterpieces were created in this very space. And as you well know, the studio space, that space of creation, is extremely important for any artist. So I'm wondering, today, what is your studio space? Where are you working? Where are you creating? Has the space you're working in now been your space for a while? Or has that evolved over time like it did for Pollock and Krasner?
Got it. Well, thank you, Matt, for having me. The studio is a very intimate space. It's like a space for creation. And, I definitely define myself as an artist whose main medium is glass. Right now, I'm super excited. I just built a studio behind my house. Which there's definitely some similarities with this. And it's really special being here. So I built a studio behind my house, and, previously the studio for me has been a lot of different places because with glass blowing, there's very big machines that are involved. The studio has been a college setting. It's been public access shops. It's been local studios. And kind of previously to that, the studio was kind of any medium that I was working with. In school, I took a lot of different visual art classes, so the studio kind of traveled depending on what I was going to be making. And, kind of back to my earliest days of making art and making things, the studio was my backyard. It was painting on things in the backyard. And then that led to painting on things in the house. And it's kind of made this pretty beautiful circle where now I've kind of built my space behind my house, and I'm super excited to have that.
So when you're building your own studio space, you're leaving behind the glass studios in Dallas that you're working with, and that I know you've been super grateful to have those spaces and work within those spaces, but now this is your space and your custom space. When it's your very own space that you're going to be working in, hopefully, probably for many years, maybe even decades to come, what considerations are you thinking about? What is going into this space that is going to make you both your most creative and your most productive?
The biggest thing is kind of thinking about where I am today and where I am gonna be, or where I'm heading towards in terms of kind of production capabilities. So I wanted to build a space that was big enough to kind of give me room to grow and give me the ability to kind of have people come in. With glass blowing, a lot of the times you have a team of people making things. So it was really important to kind of have that space. have the room to grow, have the room to push the scale, limitations of it, and just, I mean, the utilities alone. I mean, with glass blowing, I'm going to have a furnace that's at 2100 degrees on 24/7 that weighs about 5,000 pounds. So it's pretty heavy duty equipment. And, I've tried to think about how can I set myself up best, not only to kind of have the production that I need today, but thinking out 1, 3, 5 plus. And it's hard to, because you want to prepare yourself, but you also don't want to start too big or start too small. And I'm kind of excited to see where that goes.
So a couple of things you mentioned there. Big departures from the way Pollock was working, and from the way that Lee-Krasner was working, where those were, for the most part, very solitary efforts within their studio space, just them alone with their materials. And glass blowing, oftentimes, you have a team, like you said. That seems like, of course, there would be benefits in terms of collaboration and working together, but also limitations. As you move into your own space, out of a space with a built-in team, what are you thinking about there in terms of who you're going to get to work with you? And how does that impact your creative process from the point of conceptualization? You have an idea for something, but then can you start on that idea solo, or do you need to wait until you have somebody to work with you?
It really kind of just depends. I mean, I defined a lot of my process, where I hopefully don't need to be dependent on others. I was really fortunate when I was in school where I had a studio and I had unlimited access to use the facilities, and I kind of set up a pretty efficient production method where I'd make most things and most parts by myself, and then I'd have a day or two a week where I'd kind of bring an assistant in and put everything together. But that assistant or that person that you make work with is super important. I mean, you have to, this beautiful kind of language where you're communicating through this material, and you're not really kind of talking about what it is that you guys are doing. But you're there, when you're assisting, you're there to help them achieve whatever it is that needs to get achieved, and you're constantly responding to the glass. So it's really important to have people around you that understand that and don't act as kind of like a variable that holds you back in terms of what you have that you want to make. And those people are really hard to find. And I've been fortunate to spend time with a lot of different people. I have a couple people that I work really well with. But in terms of, it's this kind of sense of, it's not letting go, but having other people engaged in the process of production, it's a trusting thing, and you're both there to do the same thing. And it's not that one is more important than the other, but you're kind of acting as one. And it's something that makes the process super engaging.
So when you get into the studio to start making a piece, and the medium here is glass, you mentioned that you need to be open to what the medium does. Sounds like there is a degree of flexibility and maybe even improvisation. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in glass blowing, and we'll talk a little bit later about glass and not separating it really from art in general and not making it too specific and taking it outside of art making processes in general. But when you're setting out to make a piece out of glass, how much pre-planning do you do? How much of the concept is already in your head and you're trying to match that idea in your head versus how much is improvisation and surprises in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, glass is this interesting material where with glass blowing, you're turning a liquid into a solid. And there's a lot of kind of technical limitations that happen along the process. But when I'm working, there's a very kind of definitive plan on this is what we're doing, and this is what it's going to be. And I think that just comes with time. The more kind of time you spend with the material, the more you understand it. But with glass, there's this constant kind of read and react, where sometimes you know the thing you're making, but then as you're working on it, it'll want to do something else. And then you're constantly kind of not, I don't know if fighting it is the word, but you're guiding it, right? So the glass is 2,000 degrees and we can't use our hands. So we're using tools that kind of act as an extension of our hand. So the tools kind of, just like an assistant, they act as a means to tell the glass what to do, right? And that's another thing that's kind of really fun about it, is that you see this thing and you can't touch this thing, but you're telling it what to do and how to respond. And, you know, I always kind of talk about the process, and the process is really the best part. Like, people always ask, what's your favorite piece? It's whatever I'm making, or it's whatever I'm about to make. Yeah, it's fun.
That point of process, when we talk about Jackson Pollock, process is such a huge part of his story and why he's so important. And everything you were just saying about feeling the material and kind of this embodiment where your tool is an extension of the body, and your material is going to do things that you are simultaneously conducting and then not in total control of, and you're moving together in this dance. That is what action painting, abstract expressionism was very much about. But what's fascinating about glass art and glass blowing is that this is not really a phenomenon of modernity. This is an art form that's been around for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, thousands of years. Yeah, I mean, glass has been around for a long time. You know, I think a lot of the fun for me is kind of looking at this material that's been around, that has a process, that has ways to make things, but it's also been, you know, associated with craft, right? Glass is associated with things that get made to use, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, different towards like painting and sculpture, where those categories are put in the category of fine art, right? So I look at glass as, how can I use that as a material to create sculpture?
Now, for you, what is that line between utility and art? Because you do make some utilitarian objects, whether that be glasses, vases, etc. And then you make purely sculptural forms. So how do you as an artist balance both sides of your practice?
I mean, I think, you know, initially the response, my response was, you know, I didn't make things, or I didn't put things out there that reference function. So all of the objects that I make that would be a functional object would be something that I look at as just my process. And it's just things I make for fun. But, you know, I think by making something that's not referencing function and then putting it in the same context that a sculpture, that a cast piece of bronze would, you know, I think that's elevating the material, and it's putting it on a platform, and it's saying, this is sculpture.
And that is a big part of your work, I think, is translating glass into fine art sculpture, but not in, I don't get the sense that you're making a statement or an argument when you're making work. You're just making work. And in my interpretation, the medium happens to be glass. That is your, for whatever reasons, and we can get into that, your natural chosen medium. Do you see any distinction between your medium and anything else, like paint, or if it's sculpture, like bronze or clay?
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like how you see yourself. Like, do I see myself as a glass blower or as an artist? Right? I see myself as an artist. Like, when people say, what do? I say I make things, because it's, you know, it's as simple as that. Like, I like to make things, and I think, you know, I don't think of often, you know, artwork in terms of like the material that it is, right? But what is it, and where is it? How is it? And, you know, why glass? I mean, for me, it's been as simple as that. I love the process of making it. You know, I've played with most kind of processes of fine art and visual art, and it was kind of the first thing for me that was like, And to this day, almost a little over 10 years now, where it's like every day I do it, I love it more. And then when I don't do it, I like want to do it. And there's nothing I'd rather do. I mean, it's as simple as that. So that would be why glass.
And when we were talking about studios, you mentioned that, you didn't start with glass. You were painting as a kid. You went to Booker T High School for the Visual and Performing Arts in Dallas, Texas. A great arts high school. But it's not like you went into that school planning on focusing on glass or going to college for glass. So what was that moment when glass entered your life, that specific moment?
Yeah, so I mean, I always like probably as early as 2 or 3, I was like playing with paint, and I did a lot of painting, a lot of drawing, and then I went to Booker T. Washington, which is a great magnet school in Dallas, and they had everything except for glass blowing. And my freshman year there was a school trip to Italy where I saw glass in Murano, and I wanted to try it. And then I came home, and then I found a studio that had just opened, and then I started taking classes there. And then I was like, this is sweet. Like from day one, I saw the process and I was like, this is beautiful. And then I tried the material and I was like, this is incredible. And back in high school, I still did a lot of printmaking. I did a lot of design. What did I do? A lot of photography. And it's not that I don't love those things, right? It's just my kind of passion for glass is just a whole different thing.
But that's not to say that you're only working in glass right now. It sounds like that a little bit.
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
conversation
definitely.
So far.
Yeah.
There's other materials that you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always playing. I mean, like right now I'm working on a pretty big design it's using glass, but it's also using stainless steel. And, very different than most of my work where, this piece I'm like designing in a 3D modeling software and then turning those pieces into molds that are then getting hot cast. So like I'm constantly playing with everything, but I would say like the next big piece I'm working on right now is something that is not like my work, right? It's not something that I would categorize as like the things that I make. And it's fun. I still love it.
After that piece exists, is it then your work? Is that a new category of work that you create, or does this feel like a one-off for you?
I mean, this specific project is a pretty custom thing. So it's kind of, I'll see what I think of as I'm making it. I mean, I have a design and I have in my head how I'm going to produce it. Mm-hmm. And then, I think as I'm producing it, I'll have more ideas about kind of things that I like about it that I can change and add into other styles of my work. And I think it's all my work, right? But, I have categories and things I make and different things that I like to kind of always play with. But I also always have things that are kind of outside of the realm of things that I'm doing. And, that's another fun part of it.
Let's talk a little bit about those categories.
Yeah.
Because the structure of an artist's career is interesting. The creative process we tend to think of as this very organic, felt thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to be a professional artist, just like a professional in any field, structure is also necessary. So that balance is interesting and something we can talk about. But when you reference categories, what are your categories of creation? When you make a piece, it can go to A, B, or C. What are those? What are A, B, and C?
I mean, I have different things kind of with different intentions, right? With different goals on what they are. For me, the most important thing is that I'm making something that I want to make and I'm making something that I love to make. But then there's also the reality of like, this is what I do to make a living. So there's definitely that in my mind. And I've tried to design the processes around kind of making sure that I'm not making things for money, but I'm also making things that I can sell and that sell themselves that I also love to make. And that's kind of been the balance. So I definitely have work that's more in lines with the work that immediately is being made for like a gallery. And it's being made for one of my galleries to sell that work. And then I also have, so in the categories, right? So there would be the work that goes to galleries. And then within that, there would be, subcategories of different types of things. So I have work that's mirrored, where I blow the work transparent. And then after essentially it's making a silver solution and then coating the inside of it. So there's the mirrored work that people love, that I love, super fun, it's super happy. And it also sells well, which is a good combination of things.
Yeah.
And then, within the gallery realm, there's that. There's also texture studies, which are this kind of newer thing that I've been playing with, pushing more of. And those are, thinking about different qualities of glass and kind of highlighting them, but also it being a pretty simple form that can work in a lot of different contexts. So a lot of times with glass, people think the work is fragile, right? They think, oh, it's glass, it's thin, it's breakable, it's all these things. And while that is arguably true, I think a lot of things are. So I have kind of different categories of work that has different levels of like perceived stability and perceived fragility, thinking about how these pieces can actually live not just in my home, but in your home, in your family's home, where you have a dog, where you have a child. And, the work is definitely thought a lot about in the category of how can it live, and not just in one place. So there's kind of all the different categories and subcategories of, the galleries. And then there's also the category of commission things, which are people reach out and they have an idea. And then I'll work with them to kind of translate their idea into something that is also something that references my work and something that I'm excited about. And then there's also all the other stuff that I'm playing with in my house. And, it's not that I love one more than the other, right? But there are all these different things. And I think because I have this kind of diversity of things that I do, it keeps it where it's always fun and exciting and different. Yeah.
What are you playing with in your house?
What am I playing with in my house? Right now, I have a bunch of pieces of glass that I'm siliconing on the walls in the studio. And it's sweet. And, those are the things that are like, they're super personal and fun. And, the only kind of variation on it is like, I kind of push aside all the things that I think about with the work that goes to the galleries. Because I'm not thinking about like, how can this sell? How can this live? Because I'm quite literally adhering something to the walls of my house that can never change. But it's fun and I love it.
That seems like a very important aspect to put some energy into. Now, some might say, is there a practical purpose to that? Or is there any financial gain to that? Maybe not directly, right? But for you as an artist and not just a producer of things for sale, I would think that that is necessary to do things that just fulfill you for you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it's kind of back to the concept that I kind of always try to think about with all the work I make, which is I never want, the money side to be like the focus, right? Because if I'm just making things to make money, then I think there's a lot of other careers and things to do. So I think, the art has to be the most important, but then it's also the reality of like, how can these things truly live? And, I think what I'm doing in my house right now and what I'm doing outside of my house are things that people would want. I think there are things that less people would want than the things that are easy to see in your surroundings. So I think it's kind of that context. Because I think to be successful in the arts, you have to be able to sell work and you have to be able to put yourself out there and the work out there. And I think that things can be personal, but you can also make it available to people.
So, and this could be a complicated topic to unpack, but speaking of, if you're in the arts, you have to do what you need to do to be successful and to sustain a career. You're one of the great examples of a person, and at just 25 years old, who has made his passion into a sustainable career. That's how you make your living. You recently purchased a house and built a studio with your earnings from your career as an artist. What do you attribute your sustained and consistent success to as an artist?
Step one is like just like work, right? Work, time, energy, putting yourself out there. I think there's a lot of like business concepts that, apply in a lot of other businesses that I've kind of tried to apply towards the things that I do. And, I grew up in a family where my dad works for himself. So I kind of saw that life. And, one thing that he pushed at me from a young age was find what you love and the money will come. And, my kind of take on that now is find what you love and know how to work and the money will come. But, I think it's about, it always has to continue. You have to have 10 different things going on all the time for it being like to be like an artist that makes a living making things, for it to work. And, the first thing is the hardest. And then the second thing is a little bit less hard. And it's always hard, right? But the more you do things, the easier it is.
As a young artist at just 25 years old who has achieved a sustainable career as a creative, you are a professional artist, that's how you make your living. I want to talk a little bit about that. Jackson Pollock, when he got his first big commissions, from Peggy Guggenheim, for example, he found that supporter who believed in him and who was going to push his work, or even critics like Clement Greenberg, who wrote about his work and supported him in that way. These are these big jumping off points. What were your jumping off points where you went from somebody experimenting with being an artist, or that's who you are on a personal level? What were those transitional moments when it went from just a passion to a probable career, to something that you could live off of and live a decent life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the side of being a professional artist or a self-employed artist is a whole kind of different category. I think there's a lot of artists, there's a lot of people with careers that make art, and then I think there's people, a very small percentage, that are kind of able to be artists and also be successful at it. And there's all these kind of beautiful, special moments that are reminders of wow, like this is great. And I think like Pollock and having like the Guggenheim connection and those commissions, like is those things that kind of gave him the ability to continue doing it. And I'm trying to think about the earliest kind of big supporter I had, and what was I? I was 18 years old, and a great man, met me and then came to my first show and bought a bunch of pieces. And it was just like this beautiful moment of like this person who like kind of knows me but likes art and likes me came and bought all these pieces. And it's a moment of, there's two sides. There's the financial side, but there's also the side of like they're supporting me, they believe in me, and they want me to be successful. And the side of being a successful artist is you have to have those people, and they're not all Peggy Guggenheim. So sometimes you have to have 10 people that are 1/20th of that. And I've been fortunate to kind of find a bunch of people that believe in me and support me and have continued to over the years. And the truth is I wouldn't be anywhere without them, but I also wouldn't be anywhere without all of my galleries that support me and sell my work. And it's kind of the successful artist side. There's a lot to it. I mean, there's the selling, there's the galleries, the museum shows have helped a lot. There's also raising prices, and then the work continuing to sell at those higher prices, and then continuing to push those prices, and how to kind of find that balance of where does the work fit in, how does the work sell, what is too little, what is too much, and what is your work actually worth. That's a whole different conversation of how do you put a price on art and things.
That is a lot to consider.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but I think the main thing to like what to attribute like success to would be, I put the first is this work and working hard and responding to emails and doing like infinite amount of little things that I think get taken for granted a lot of the times. I think being on time, being early, showing up, getting your work packed correctly and making sure it always gets there, following up with people. There's a lot of little things that I think that, aren't a part of like the production of the work and even the work itself, but help with the professionalism that helps you as an artist.
The interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, I'm in constant contact with every one of my galleries to make sure, do they need anything from me? How can I help? The more that they're thinking about me, the more they have to talk about me. Simple as that. And it helps, right? And it's following up with my clients. I have lists of everyone that's ever purchased anything from me, and I will follow up with everyone every year at the bare minimum. Holidays, times come around, they're going to get a gift. I think looking at all these things the same way that you would look at a job if you were in real estate, if you were a doctor, if you're a lawyer. I think looking at it through a professional lens really helps with success.
I will say this, though. I don't get a yearly gift from my doctor. So that is one difference.
Yeah. Let us send him a letter.
Now, we said it's a lot of considerations, and you have to be on top of all of these different things. And you work with your galleries, but it's you, right? You are the business in a lot of ways.
Yeah, totally.
You and the work, and you are your work.
Yeah.
Now, as Pollock achieved great success, right? In a lot of ways, America's first or one of America's first celebrity artists, some of those considerations and those stresses, we can definitely say got to him. And he felt those pressures. And eventually, that was a drain on him. We're here in his studio that he was able to purchase this property with Lee Krasner because of a down payment that Peggy Guggenheim gave them in exchange for exclusive representation of his new work at the time. And for years, he was extremely productive in this space. But then there came a time in the 1950s when he became less productive, and I think, and many would say, his own success started to feel like a burden and a pressure, and he wasn't painting as much. And he was looking for other mediums like sculpture to express himself, to maybe get away from some of his own reputation that felt like a lot for him to sustain. Now you're just starting out in a lot of ways. You've been blowing glass, like you said, for 10 years, but you're very young. And you do have this sustainable and consistent career. Do you have practices in place that you feel will prevent or do prevent that kind of burnout, that keep you feeling fresh and excited, and where you don't feel the pressure of all of these considerations of what you need to do as an artist to sustain yourself?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, I've been asked a bunch, like, do you get like sick of it? Because like I make things a lot, and I always think like I'd love it more every day. I mean, it's pretty simple for me. I have this thing that I love to do, and all the stress that would not come from the production. It can come from all the other things. It can come from the business side of it. But that's where, I've tried to design my system where I'm making things that I want to make, that make me happy, right? So it's like and I think, having all these different categories, I think that keeps it fun, where I'm not, I'm not in a sense like this factory. I'm not making one thing all day, as many as I can, right? I have everything, and I think also everything being one of one, right? Everything is its own piece, period. There's groupings and things that kind of work together, but it's always its own new thing. And I think it's really important to to constantly have things that are making you excited. And I can't really talk to like what do I do to like not get burnt out or not have those things. But what I can say is that I don't right now.
I think something unique about you is that you genuinely enjoy the business aspect of it as well, though.
Yeah, I love it. I love the people side. I love the relationships. And yeah, also it's like I get asked all the time, like, what do I wish I would be doing, and what do I wish that I would have other people do for me? And it's like, so far, like, there's nothing that I wouldn't want to do. And I think, like when you talked about Pollock-Krasner and them having their space and them working, pretty alone in their space, I've set up kind of my business, how an artist sets up their studio. I mean, and there's good and bad to that, right? It's like the fact that I have to do everything, right? There's negatives to that, but also the positives are that then I do not have to be dependable on someone else to do them.
Yeah.
And I'm in control of it. And, the business side of that is that could limit growth. So then there's that side of how do you grow without letting go of things, or how do you let go of things correctly? And again, I'm not there yet, so I don't know.
It strikes me that when I brought up the business side of your career of art making, you didn't talk about numbers and money. You said, yes, I love people. So I think thinking about business as people, as relationships, I feel that that's a big part of why you enjoy it. Because it's not just spreadsheets and numbers. All of those numbers correspond to a person and a relationship that you have with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, everything is like very connected. Like there's this total gray area of like professionalism and friendship and personal and all that stuff. And I love it. I mean, everyone that I interact with on a business level is a friend. And I can't say all my friends are clients, but every business client is also a friend. And I think it makes it where it's not a transaction. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's really not. I mean, like, it's texting them happy birthday, or like asking for a picture of their grandkids. I mean, and it's lovely. I mean, I have clients that like bought something in 2019 and 2022, and I'll talk to them the same as the person who right now is commissioning something that's massive. That's my biggest project ever. It's all kind of the same realm of like, this is a person that supports me and believes in me. Oh, and I also like them as a person. Mm-hmm. It's a great thing. Yeah.
So people are an incredible part of what you do. Not just your clients or the people you work with in a financial sense, but I would imagine your teachers and the people you've learned from in terms of your craft. Jackson Pollock had some of the best teachers. Although their work does not formally resemble one another, their mature work. Jackson Pollock trained with Thomas Hart Benton at the Art Students League in New York. He came out east with his brothers. He trained at the Art Students League, also with the great Mexican muralist, David Siqueiros. So he was training with these really accomplished, experienced realist painters, these regionalist painters, these muralists. And although in Pollock's abstract work, we might not see those formal comparisons, in terms of their professionalism, the way they went about their craft, and even in terms of how Pollock thought of his work on a grand scale, he once wrote that the mural was the future of painting. This immersive, grand work of art. A lot of that is coming from who he learned from. So I'm curious, who did you learn from? And how is their influence visible in the work you're making today?
It's really interesting. I mean, I think I've been fortunate to kind of be around a lot of different people that I look up to and, successful people for a lot of different reasons. I mean, within the arts, it's interesting when you were saying that, I was thinking about which artists do I have that I look up to for both kind of their work and their professionalism. And I really don't. Like, I have artists that I've spent a lot of time with that I really look up to in terms of the work they create and how much it kind of works with them as a person. And then, on kind of the business side, I also have all of these relationships with kind of people that I would also call mentors that I look up to kind of in just who they are and how they operate. And, kind of the most important thing for me that I realized spending time with artists was the artists whose work stood out the most for me was the people that when you saw the work, you saw them in the work. And, I think that's something that kind of all artists kind of want, is that when you see the work, you see them in the work. And I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about that. And that's, if there's anything that I hope about the work, it would be that. It would be that you see me in the work. But, I think getting influence on people on kind of the whole realm of kind of how I've shaped my life, I don't have that as much. I kind of have a lot of different people that have been really impactful on my life, and I've taken kind of little things from a lot of those people and put them together into something. And then it's really fun too, because then I'm constantly thinking about them. And it's like, oh, that's from them.
It's a good point that an
Yeah.
artist does not have to be mentored or learn from exclusively other artists. Art is a very natural extension of yourself, but maybe you're learning things like on the business side or just your approach to how you structure your life and your career. You don't have to learn that from another artist. I
Yeah,
suppose. That's
exactly.
what you seem to be saying.
Yeah. I mean, like, when you were just saying that, I was just thinking, it's like, if I had to say, like, who would be like the one mentor that I would like give the most like credit to, I mean, first, like, my dad would be mad if I didn't say my dad, so like dad, but then it would be like the president of my college, who, like, I took a class with him my junior or senior year, and he was teaching an anthropology class, and I was like, I don't care about anthropology, but I like to get to know people that are power, so I took the class. And then, throughout the class, it was like, all of a sudden he was doing weekly Zooms, and then me and him got like really close. And then it turned into, I spent a lot of time with him, and I made gifts for some of the board members and bunch of different stuff. But I also kind of spent time with him and learned a lot about kind of his role and the things that he was doing. And I learned so much about how this person kind of organizes people and manages the systems that are in place and how to get stuff done. I mean, I learned so much about nonprofits and development and so many like little things and weird lessons that I like think of to this day. So it's interesting when you think of like artists, and then artists having like people that were close in their life that impacted them. And like my first thoughts are like a college president.
What were some of
Yeah.
the gems he gave you, or the most influential things he said to you, or things you saw him doing?
There's a lot there. The first thing would be as simple as this person went to, his name's Don Tusky, by the way, but he went to and goes to every student event no matter what. I mean, and that kind of led to like one of the lessons that he passed down, which was say yes to everything until you can't, right? And, a lot of them are kind of these pretty like simple lessons that can be taken in so many places. The say yes thing. I mean, it's as simple as my path on that is say yes to everything because you do not know what opportunities are going to present itself. And the more places you put yourself out there, the more that can come from it. Um, what's another one? I mean, the other one would be give credit when credit due, which is just as simple as giving credit to people. You know, a lot of the times people don't hear thank you, right? And, you know, kind of my change on that was give credit to everyone, because everyone wants to feel like they're a part of it. And I think the more you can kind of bring people in, the more kind of they get on the team, right? And people really love to be a part of something, and no matter what it is.
And you work with all different sorts of people, but also all different kinds of institutions. We talked about galleries, we talked about commissions that you might be doing for private individuals or for corporations. Another facet of what you do is the institutional show, the museum exhibition. And you have done 5 museum exhibitions so far, is that correct?
Yes.
How is that forum different from the others for you? And how do you approach that differently? How do you create for that differently?
I mean, the museum show, museums, like as art institutions, are a beautiful thing and a great thing for artists. I mean, with professional artists, most of the time when they think about showing their work, they have to think about selling their work. And museums give like this great kind of platform where it's not about that. I mean, museums are not about selling work. Museums are usually about showing work to the community and showing work to the public and bringing people in for whatever reasons they have. And, you know, from the artist side, it's great because I don't have to think about all of kind of the selling points of things, but all of a sudden you're given a floor plan and then you get to come up with an idea. And, you know, throughout kind of every relationship I've had with every museum, I've learned something from it. And, you know, I think there's definitely a whole business to working with nonprofits and with museums. But also, you know, on the art side, it gives you this great opportunity to get to make things that you wouldn't be able to make, or you wouldn't have the time to kind of to focus on making something. I mean, with museums, they're there to help you bring this idea to reality.
What's an example of something you've done with an institutional space like a museum that was more experimental, that isn't something that would be reflected in one of the galleries that you show with, or is something that you had an idea for and the museum space gave you the opportunity to go for it?
It's a good question. I mean, there's 2 that first come to mind. The first one would be like the earliest one, which would be the first time I kind of like wanted to put something out there that they hadn't seen before. And this was in 2019 at the Longview Museum of Fine Arts. And, you know, the only work of mine that they kind of knew was like the pretty work. A lot of my work is very pretty things. And, you know, kind of around that same time, I was also working on these assemblages of glass and silicone, where I was using silicone kind of as a tool to paint on the glass, but then also stick the glass together. And, you know, with Longview, is like, they gave me half their museum, and I was like, this is what I want to do, and I want to put all these assemblages here. I want to put them on the floor, and I want to put them on this beam, and I wrap them around the pedestal. And, you know, that was kind of the first realization of like, oh, like I don't have to think about like how this can sell or how this can live, but I can just look at this kind of space as a way to make a statement. And, you know, some can say there was good from that, some can say there was bad from that. I mean, the good would be that I got to kind of do this idea that I had. You know, the bad on like the economic side would have been that like what I spent time on was not something that at the time was like a sellable tool or sellable to the community. But I think those things, having those things that you do, are very important in conjunction with having things that can also make you a living.
That balance.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I think going off that, I mean, most recently, my last museum show was at the Museum of the Southwest in Midland. And, you know, there's this one beautiful gallery with this beautiful light coming in from the center, and I wanted to like put 500 what I call Skittles on the wall. So the Skittles are these kind of mirrored discs, and there's no reason for me to make 500 of anything. And all I needed was the team to be kind of on board with like this idea, and then I was like, okay, now I'll do that. And museums give you an opportunity to have an idea and see it to fruition.
You mentioned sellable work. Do you make a distinction in your own mind and in your practice between sellable and unsellable work?
Oh, that's hard. I mean,
Or less sellable?
in my mind, no. In my mind, no. But then I have to put myself in the mind of like my galleries and the type of work that my galleries show and that my galleries sell. So if someone comes to me, I will gladly show them everything, right? But I also know that my gallery in New York, my gallery in Scottsdale, Florida, wherever, right? I know the type of work that they're showing, and they're going to have the type of work of mine that fits the type of work that they're going to show, and they think they can sell. So there's different kind of realities to like what is sellable. Sellable is all about the context that the work is being shown and who the work is being shown to. But this is America. Everything is sellable.
That's a good message. So knowing your audience, knowing the context is very important.
Yeah.
Both in terms of if you're trying to sell work and who you're showing work to, the community that you're working within, environment impacts what you're making. Just like the studio environment impacts the kind of work you can make, the scale of work you can make. Your glass works are very reliant on the proper machinery, which, like you said, these are huge machines. A lot goes into it. When Lee Krasner was working in the bedroom studio, her works tended to be much smaller. And when she moved into this studio, they became much bigger. So your environment, your context influences the kind of work you make. You've made work for both interior spaces and exterior spaces. What kind of considerations go into, as you move more and more into public art and public works, what considerations go into your process then? I guess also you can say if it's a corporate space versus a public space, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot to unpack there. I mean, when you're designing something for a specific space, there's a lot of kind of rules and restrictions that come with it, right? I mean, if you're in a public space, you have to think about all the variables that can exist from kids running around to animals to weathering to kind of all of those things. In terms of outdoor and public things, the things that excite me are all the pieces that I've been designing that kind of utilize kind of cast glass and assemblages and pieces, right? Where all of a sudden I'm not thinking about what can I physically make as a one piece with glass blowing, but what can be designed and then produced individually, then assembled on site. And that is exciting to me just in terms of scale and kind of what it can be and kind of how big it can be. What else is there?
Tell us about the project that you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm just got approval on design number 42.24, which was, this has been a beautiful process. And, it's a whole big part of it where it's a corporate client and I have never spoken to the client. And I'm doing this all through a art dealer who, when working with art dealers, a lot of the times they have an idea in their head, which is different than their client has in their head. And then I give them something based on what they say to me, but not what the client says. And then there's been a lot of back and forth. And, I got approval like 2 weeks ago. And now it's like, oh, I get to make it now. It's this weird moment. Spent 5 months back and forth. But, when also for me, when designing something, I'm thinking, the business side, it's like, I'm only going to design something that I'm excited about making. So it's like, that's also gone into every design. So how do I design something that stays true to me and what I believe, but is also something that gets them to like it. And this is, I think we started talking about it, but it's going to be these cast components that are all going to stack and then make this double helix that's probably about a foot taller than me and like this wide, weighs like 7 of me. But it's an exciting thing for me just in terms of production and assembly and thinking of making all these components and then putting them all together. And then what did I kind of figure out in this design process and how can I utilize what I learned for other things or other ideas that I have?
When there are that many variables at play, both in terms of the materials, the design, what it's going to look like, then you also have the client, the dealer, and the artist. It seems like a lot of flexibility is needed. You're waiting at certain points. Not everything is in your control. How do you deal with rolling with the punches in that sense?
I don't know if it's about dealing with it. I think, the biggest thing is recognizing that that talk is cheap. I mean, it doesn't mean anything until you have commitment, until you have a deposit, right? So it's like, how do you deal with it is you need to be okay with it. And all the time that you're spending on it, knowing that nothing actually means anything until you have everyone on board. And, I think that's something that's really hard for a lot of people, to like kind of have this long back and forth. And, I think it's also important to have multiple things like that going on. It's the only way for it to work, because a lot of the times you just talk and you talk about an idea and then you follow up a couple months later. And, it's not that like people have bad intentions, but, it's hard to give someone an idea and sell someone something that they don't need. Art is not something that people need. Art is something that they want. And sometimes they don't want it. They don't know they want it. You have to show them something and tell them why they want it. So it's like this interesting balance of like getting people that love the work to want the work, right?
And I hear you saying that you are willing to dive into something that is not promised.
Yeah. You have to. And I'm doing that all the time. And that's going back to the say yes to everything till you can't, right? I mean, put yourself out there, because you do not know if you do not try. And then, then the hard part is like, how do you put yourself in the best ability to be successful in every one of the opportunities that presents itself? Because how much time can you really invest into something when it's taking you away from this other thing, or it's taking you away from something that you have to be doing? And how do you prioritize all those things?
And that is where, is this correct, that's where you find the advantage of casting a wide net?
Yeah, I think definitely of having a lot of things going on and kind of never really getting lazy in the sense of like, oh, like I have this thing and it's okay, right? I think, like when you said the comment about like you're a successful 25-year-old, like I don't look at it as that. I look at it as I've been successful, right? I've had success, but like it has to continue. And like, how does that continue? That continues by not working less. And the concept of work, right? I mean, for me, I hate when someone says like, are you going to work? Like if I ever think of something, this is a big thing. If I ever think of something as work, then I think I'm doing something wrong.
You mentioned work a lot and the importance of work.
Yeah.
But now I'm getting the sense that part of what for you is instrumental to your work being productive, being sustainable, in a lot of ways being constant, is that it is not, you do not categorize it as something distinct from your day-to-day life, from on a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour basis. There is not a working time and a living time. Do you have a distinction between your downtime or your personal life and your working life? Are those different Simons? Are those different people?
Oh, no, it's all the same. Yeah, it's not like, and I think that's, it's just kind of who I am, right? Who I am is a extension of the things that I make. It's as simple as that.
A symbiosis between
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
person and the work and the business, the in studio, the in office. You see it as one holistic thing.
Yeah, totally. I'm never on or off, which can be good and bad.
That's a difficult thing, I think, for a lot of us to achieve. You hear people talk about work-life balance, and I think implicit in that idea is that the work part of it is draining. But it doesn't sound like something that you struggle with, is the drain of work.
Yeah, no, it's like a love.
And that's a beautiful thing when one can achieve it.
Yeah, it's a love. It's the thing of there's nothing I'd rather do, right? I'd like to do it.
So if you were going to give, I don't want to say advice, but let's say advice.
Yeah.
Advice or, a little comment to somebody who would love to be in the same position, from a young artist who would love to turn their passion, the thing that they love doing and that doesn't feel like work, if they want to just do that thing forever, what would you tell them?
I'd say to continue to do it, right? To do that thing, right? And you can't hide behind the thing. If you want to do a thing and have that be your livelihood, then the financial side of it has to be very present. And it's not like it's like easier said than done. It's just whatever the thing is, right? What are the paths to success? What do you like about any of those paths to success? And then start small and put yourself out there. Put yourself out there in any context, right? If you want to be an artist in any way, if you want to be anything in any way, right? I mean, I think there's a sense of like working harder than anyone else is going to put you above everyone else. But then on the other end, only compare yourself to yourself. You're your only competition, right? And if you need to compare yourself, then you're not doing good.
In the field of art,
yeah,
it is a unique space where definitely more than any other field, the work is so closely identified with the worker, where that which is created is seen as an extension of the creator. I'm sure we've talked about it, but before, when you see your glass, you see yourself. Do you ever feel more risk or more anxiety about putting yourself out there, putting your work out there because of that close identification, that every time you put your work out there, in some sense, you're putting yourself out there to be judged and either accepted or not accepted, or purchased or not purchased?
I think you have to be okay with that, right? I mean, I look at like any opportunity to put the work out there as an opportunity for the work to be seen. And then then it goes back into like the context side of it, which is like, where do you want your work to be seen? But I think that's a later conversation about context, which is where do you want the work to be seen? How do you want the work to be seen, and why? But the simplest for me, I have no issue putting work out there, and I like to.
But you want to make sure it's in the right context.
Yeah. At this point, the context really matters.
What is that context for you?
The context of where the work is going. I mean, I'm thinking of that in terms of the galleries that I'm in, right? And then if I work with a different gallery on the type of work that they're showing and the price point of work that they're showing and where they're showing, it's not to say, of the saying no to people, because I don't like that, right? But it's at this point, you kind of have to really think about not really what I want, but what do the other people want that are also showing the work, and the other people that have put money and branding and marketing and stuff behind it.
So when you mention price point, are you referring to that the galleries you're working with are valuing your work at the level you feel it should be valued?
Price point I'm referring as to kind of what is the price point of the art that is being shown in that gallery. So
The entire roster that
yeah,
they show.
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
And are you at a point now where you feel like that's changing for you?
Always, yeah, yeah. And I've made changes because of that. Because it's not that you don't want to be the cheapest person in the gallery. You don't want to be the most expensive. But you want to be with work that is in a comparable price point, in a comparable setting. But I also, on the completely other end, I also like being in the lower price point category because then I look cheap.
And you like that?
Yeah, it's all relative. Because if you put something next to a Pollock that's $2 million, then I look cheap.
Or one might say affordable.
Yeah, exactly. It's all exactly. It's all relative. But if you go to a craft fair and then you have this piece that's $10,000, then it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like when I was young, I did a bunch of craft fairs and I love that. I love the human side. But like I can't do that now.
Yeah.
Because my prices have to be the same everywhere.
Yeah. There's a self-awareness and awareness of how you're changing throughout your life. And as we grow in our lives and careers, you're right, our contexts change.
Yeah.
So when you look at your work, and we've talked a little bit about seeing the self in the work, when we look at Lee Krasner's work, for example, that she made right here in this studio, works like Gaia, works that she made after Pollock's death, viewers will comment on, oh, I see an awakening there, an expanding this, or a connection with nature, a growth of the individual, right? When you look at your work and you see yourself in your work, what are the qualities, the formal qualities of your sculpture that you think reflect who you are as a person?
Or the formal qualities. I mean, I think there's different kind of qualities in different things. I think and this goes back to like the category side of it, right? I mean, I think looking at the work throughout like a 10-year period, right? You see kind of different like moments of like there was a shift. And I think that's super interesting, right? And then I think, within the work I have now, I have a bunch of different kind of subcategories of work. And I think with every different kind of piece or different kind of category of pieces, there's a different kind of gesture that I'm going after.
Well, let's get into it. Tell me each subcategory of your glass.
Well, I mean,
forms that you make.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones that are kind of the most fun to make and kind of the most fun and happy pieces would be like the wiggles, which are, essentially, it's kind of so hard to describe it when it's not here or here.
We'll cut in the clip.
Yeah, exactly. But these like pretty weird shape, mirrored pieces. A lot of them have these patterns where the patterns are they're all kind of inspired by Venetian techniques. We've spent a lot of time kind of practicing those techniques and then playing with them and changing them. And, these patterns are on the surface of the glass. And it's something that's like hyper technical and hyper detailed. And then it's on top of this like form that is blown in a way where a part of it is very thin. And then when I'm working on it, I stop turning. And with glass, you're always turning to keep it on the pipe. But then I stop turning and then it all wants to kind of collapse or wrinkle. And it kind of captures this beautiful moment in time underneath these like very, very technical patterns that are very planned out and very intentional. So I think, with those pieces, I love kind of the balance of like this, like being very kind of planned out with the work, but then also having this moment where it all kind of stops. Mm-hmm. And then it's not, also the finished pieces are not referencing anything. Like they are sculptural, organic forms. And I like that they can just kind of live as this gesture and as this kind of moment in time.
And that balance between rigidity, structure, tradition, and history, and then the whimsy of this undulating, fun, fluid moment. Like you said, there's the history, there's the background, which feels concrete, which feels like it is a part of time. And then this fleeting moment, which you have crystallized, which I guess that's part of glass too, right? This liquid, which you're working with it and you have to take advantage of it and dance with it and play with it in this very fleeting period of time before it's hardened.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
What
Yeah.
have you learned from your medium?
Interesting. There's a lot of lessons you learn when you learn to blow glass. And, a big one is like, don't get attached. When you're learning to blow glass, a lot of the times your pieces fall on the floor and they break. And I kind of got this mindset of, not getting attached to these things. And then that kind of turning into like, if you get really attached, then it's going to break. And it's kind of this interesting balance of like, all it is just this thing that you're doing. And it's as simple as that. And I think, that's kind of helped with other things in life where, I think you can stress out about things all the time and there's things that are not at your control. And I think the ability to kind of stop and step back and just kind of recognize that like, I am no part of this. It just is. Makes it easy. I think it makes it hard to then get like very connected to it. But it's kind of a way to not let things get to you and kind of get under your skin. The biggest one, actually, glass. Back in the day, I learned that if I was mad or upset, then I couldn't blow glass well. So then I decided that I cannot be mad or upset. As simple as that.
When you're blowing glass?
Yeah.
Or all the time?
No, all the time. Because if I'm mad and then I go to the studio and I was just mad, then I blow glass bad. And I do not. That's not okay.
So the medium,
I can't be upset.
And the way that your medium works, just by nature of being glass, has sort of dictated or encouraged that you work towards balance in yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, totally. Can't be upset. Then I make mistakes, then it falls on the ground, then I get annoyed. And then if I'm annoyed, then I can't blow gas. Terrible cycle.
But how could you not ever get upset?
Well, I know myself now, right? So it's like, if I'm upset and I know I was going to blow glass, there's no point to.
So then there's this moderation that comes into play. I'm very aware of how I'm feeling because how I'm feeling affects what I do.
Yep.
So now I have to work with that. And you have to learn how to, I would guess, modulate your emotions very precisely.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, and then, think about like painting, right? And what Pollock and Krasner did here. It's like if the mood that they were in, I guarantee you reflected the piece that they were making, right? And then they're responding in a different way. And, one downside with kind of the material that I'm working with is there's such like a line between like, it's okay and it's not. Where like, if there's an issue, it can just actually fall on the floor and then it's broken and then you start over. So I kind of don't have that ability as much to kind of be upset and make upset work. I can make upset work in different ways, but not in, my way of working most of the time.
What do you use to make your upset work?
Just depends the day. Depends what I got around me.
Silicone?
Silicone a lot, yeah. It's easy.
Wood?
There's been some wood in there, but that was just another. I've played with everything.
Paint,
metal, photography, every Adobe product.
So we're here on site at the Pollock-Krasner house, and you've had time to walk around and explore. As you've walked around our grounds here at the Pollock-Krasner house, you've been in the studio, you've been in the house itself. You've seen Accabonac Creek. This is the environment that inspired Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner. What has been your reaction to the environment and to the site here?
I mean, it's beautiful. It's lovely. I mean, you're like looking out at like nature and from most of the windows, like you don't know like if there's like people close by or people super far away. There's something lovely with like being this close to so many people, but then also having like so much space at your disposal. And I mean, just the nature is beautiful, the texture is beautiful. And it feels kind of untouched, right? I mean, like when I drove into this town, there was the sign, and it was whatever, like opened in 1670 or something. And it's like in 400 years, and this is all they've done. But it's like, you know, it's just they've left it as it is, and it's this like moment in time that's kind of been captured.
Like the glass.
Like the glass. It's beautiful. I want to come and play here, but I can't play on that floor.
Mm-hmm.
Not allowed.
No.
Tempting.